Hi, this is Daria. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm here to tell you a few tips on how to improve your sight reading skills. Regardless of your level of playing, you can use these strategies and tactics to improve the way you sight read, meaning the way you play the music for the first time. There are people who can do it as if they had a computer in their head. You put whatever the difficulty of the piece you put in front of them. I don't have that ability. So I have to come up with certain tips and ideas on how to help myself improve. So I'm going to share those tips with you today. One important thing to keep in mind is that there are different types of sight reading. I personally distinguish two main types of sight reading. One is when you are trying to play the piece for the first time, but you're trying to do your best in bringing the performance closest to the composer's idea, meaning you want to maintain the tempo as close as possible. That's what the composer wanted. You want to maintain the continuous musical flow and just to play music and enjoy. The second type of sight reading has to do with when you start working on a new piece and it's the first time you are playing through it. In that case, there is a different approach that you can take it much slower, you can split the hands and things like that. So I'm going to be talking today about the approach of the first type. Keeping that in mind also gives you an idea that you really have to be realistic in your expectations. You can't expect yourself to play a piece from sight that will take you 6 months to learn. So I would recommend bringing your sight reading practice at least 2 or 3 levels down from what you can play with several months of practice. I have a cheat sheet here so I don't forget anything. So let's go. Tip number 1. Focus on the contour of the line in each hand, on the horizontal line. It helps you guide your hand movement in the right direction, and most importantly, it helps you choose the most comfortable and most efficient fingering. Fingering, when it comes to playing the piano, as you might have already noticed, is at least 50% of our success. Why is it important even more in sight reading? Because when we learn a piece, we have time, even with the uncomfortable fingering, to play it a few times and then eventually we get used to it. When we sight reading, we really need to go with the most efficient, the most natural fingering possible in order to go smoothly without stumbling over certain twists and turns when you change direction and things like that. So anticipating your contour of the line and those changes, not just with your ear, but also with your hand gestures, with the movements, that's what's going to give you really 70% of your success when you sight reading. When the fingering is indicated in the score, well, you're lucky, so follow the fingering, stick to it. Unless it's really bad, which is unlikely, but then you won't know because you're already done with playing the piece for the first time. Haha. Well, choose the good edition. Now that I can tell you, better to choose a good edition than a bad edition. Okay, so when the fingering is not indicated in the score, or not all of it is indicated, sometimes when it repeats, it doesn't indicate the second time, or it might not indicate anything except the changes of the position, meaning the thumb and something that comes before the thumb or after the thumb. When this is the case, you really need to trust the natural flow of what your hand wants, and you really need to follow the contour horizontally. Even if you have 2 hands at the same time, follow horizontal line of each hand to determine the best fingering. For example, I will try to be as brief as I can with the example. Minuet. Here the contour is important for 2 reasons. One main reason is because we don't have a fingering on the first note, so we have to figure out, okay, we're gonna go up, something looks like a triad, spanning an octave, and so therefore thumb is the most legit choice, left hand. Going down, spanning an octave, so thumb also works really well, and it gives us symmetry, which is also great. And another thing about the contour, right away we can see that the contour is imitation, meaning that the left hand is going to imitate something similar to what right hand just did, except they're going to take turns in terms of first measure, second measure. So I have already prepared my right hand for the octave span and something with a triad in between. And I know that I'm going up to G, then down a big leap, but it's not a G, it's one note above, it's an A, and then big leap up, not quite a G, but an F sharp right below, and then going to G, and then falling down to that, right? And I already see that there is a repetition of the contour, and then the left hand contour is slightly simpler than the right hand, but it's similar. So let's see, we're gonna start with thumb on both, and we're gonna anticipate the contour with our ear and with the fingers too, with the movements of the hands if we need to move the hand or the wrist. Here we go. Now there is a change of the contour, and we're gonna anticipate that change too. Anticipate the change. For example, I know that right hand is going to repeat 3 times the same note, and I'm going to change fingering on it, and the left hand is going to go up, down. So also, when you anticipate the contour of the line horizontally, you can also anticipate the changes in articulation, if there are any. When there is a slur, it's ending. When there is staccato, no legato, things like that. Again, another minuet by Haydn. Here we have, again, no fingering given on the first note. And then you can already anticipate the position of the hand, because you look at the second measure, it gives you 1 on D. Therefore, naturally, your A is already under the 5th finger, which is what you're going to use. And you can already anticipate that the contour repeats. Right? And then something different. Instead of tira-dee-da, it's tira-dee-da, contour in the 4th measure is just a simple chromatic scale. And I'm going to anticipate the fingering. Luckily, it's given to me, so I'm going to try to follow whatever is written. So let's try that. A little stumble there because I didn't think about the left hand, right? And what I should have anticipated in the left hand is going down 2, 3, 2. Now on the second line, you have a change of contour, and you're going to follow the fingering that's given. And I would anticipate going up and then down. No change of fingering needed because it's only here. Again, it gives you when to change. That means that you ran out of fingers of the thumb, and then you're going to put 2. If there is no fingering written, it means just go in order. And then instead of here, change contour. So anticipate that it's going to change by putting the right finger. So reading the finger also helps you read the note. But don't be deceived by just following the numbers, because that's also wrong. As like I showed you in the example with the Bach, there was a change of fingering on one note, and most likely we're going to do that, and it's going to get you confused. So it helps, but don't rely on it too much. Tip number 2, scan for familiar patterns. You recognize the formulaic pianistic writing, and you lock into a certain pattern straight away. Well, assuming that you already have these patterns in your toolbox somewhere. If you don't, then you have to build your vocabulary of those patterns before you can start recognizing them, of course. This will help you read by bigger fragments. So you won't be focusing on, okay, this is one note, this is the next note, this is the next note, this is the next note. I'm giving you an example. For example, Alberti bass. It's a pattern, right? Sometimes one note changes, like that, right? If you recognize that's a pattern, you already lock into it, and you only look at when the note changes in one of the voices. That's it. It's much, much easier, and it just flows better. And then, of course, you have to be alert on when the pattern changes, then you have to walk into a new pattern. You will see blocks of notes rather than individual notes and achieve more connection between the notes. And also it helps with coordination. when the patterns feel familiar, right? So instead of with the ability based pattern, if you already know this just on its own, whatever, you can play anything you want in the right hand, because that coordination is already stable in your memory, in your physical memory of your hands. So that of course helps. So recognizing these patterns and building a vocabulary of those patterns is a good way to go. Here are a few more examples on that. Right. For familiar pattern recognition, the best type of pieces that will help you get patterns under your fingers are etudes or studies. And for example, if you have this etude number 12 here, you already see that there is a pattern that occurs right away. And as long as you are familiar with it, or if you can quickly adapt to it, then you will just reuse it over and over. Changes a little bit, right? So what am I doing? I'm not reading note after note. I'm reading big picture. So I'm reading, okay, step up, skip down, step up, skip down, and I'm just kind of reading dum 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 dum. I'm reading where I have slight twist, up or down, but I'm not reading every note. I'm good. I'm reading every other note, let's say. In this pattern, every other note works just really well. What it also does, it makes you already shape your line better, because you already know that there is kind of hidden voice and so on, right? And then you can focus on your left hand. Once you have a pattern in the right hand, the left hand is the one that you're going to focus on, because it changes. Now here the pattern changes, and when it does change, you're going to quickly adjust. And because I'm looking ahead, I already know. And the contour, I'm going up. And then again, change here. And of course, if you have an octava, it sometimes trips you up, because octava sometimes is not in the best places. Like for example, here I wish it wasn't between the E and D, because it's actually a step, but visually it looks like a seventh. So you have to be creative here and kind of follow your intuition. If you see it, if you anticipate it, that it's just a scale going down, then you're not going to be stumbling here. Here's another example with a pattern. And you actually have a pattern here kind of in both right hand and left hand. And the contour is important. Let's see. What is the pattern? Skip, step, skip, steps down, skip, steps down. Left hand has also a pattern. And if you take this apart into two voices already, a little bit, almost. It's not exactly the same, because G is repeated twice instead of EG, but let's try. So that one pattern gave me already 3 measures, with the idea that of course I follow the left hand because it's more difficult. And again, in this pattern, I don't need to follow 4 notes, I follow 1 note. Just the first. And I notice that's a scale, so I don't need to worry about this at all. And then here again. I follow only the first note. And then the pattern changes. This is where I'm going to bring attention to, the place where it's changing. And here, the left hand pattern changes. Pattern doesn't necessarily have to be only the notes. It could be a rhythmic pattern. At least the left hand has consistently 1/8 note per beat. Here, my attention already will be on the left hand, because guess what? Well, right hand is repeating the same thing over, so I'm not going to worry about the right hand, but I'm going to worry about the left hand. lucky for me, it also has a pattern. So what I'm going to worry about is E, then B, because then G, then E, and C, right? So tip number 3. I'm going to say something that's super obvious, and you're going to say, Daria, oh, come on, I knew that already. Well, of course, but it's still, I'm going to say it anyway. Look ahead, both vertically and horizontally. Horizontally is the contour of the line that I told you to follow in the first tip. Vertically, for the piano, it's crucial because, well, guess what? We have 2 hands, so something always happens simultaneously in the left and the right hand. Okay, not always. Sometimes there's only one hand playing. Sure, that's true. But most of the time you have harmony that goes vertically, right? And then the melody, I'm simplifying, the melody that goes horizontally. If you have polyphonic music where you have multiple lines and they're independently moving at the same time, they still have some kind of vertical alignment that you have to keep in mind. It is extremely important. Looking ahead, of course, in general is great. Even if you walk on the street looking ahead, it's a good idea. But when you play the music, it's like when reading a text. You have to follow your sentence structure. You have to anticipate if there is a comma, a period, a semicolon, things like that. It helps you grasp the meaning so you don't read word after word, right? So I know it's obvious, but still, think in longer phrases, not about each note in isolation. So a continuity of flow of narration, musical narration. So when we look ahead vertically, what we can do is we can identify structural harmonic arrivals, which are called cadences. If you don't know what a cadence is and you want to know more, just Google it. It's extremely important to understand that in music. So once you identify the cadences, you can anticipate the harmonic motion and harmonic shifts and changes vertically as well as melodic contour changes. And that can help you avoid weird notes that do not belong. So if you hear that you have a cadence, then you're expecting certain harmony, maybe a dominant or cadential 6/4, going to the tonic. The tension resolution you already anticipated with your ear, and your hands are ready to follow your ear, and you play the right accidentals rather than the wrong accidentals. Here are some examples. This is an example where you play one hand at a time. So your vertical and horizontal are kind of on the same plane because the verticality is achieved through the horizontal note after note, but they sum up to a harmonic chord. We'll see what I mean. We'll say we play. So I'm already anticipating the contour with my line in the right hand. And I also have to anticipate it through the changes between the hands. So I need to merge them in my mind onto one line here. So we have a contour and the continuity of the horizontal line, while it gives us the verticality as well. If you put the pedal, we have. So all of this I'm seeing already. I'm scanning for these things before I start playing. I hear that vertically, right? And now something changes. Here I trusted my intuition and I saw the pattern repeat, and I don't need to calculate, oh wow, what are these ledger lines? I know it's, I already see that it's the same. Also, this is a good example with 2 hands playing in treble clef, and you need to make sure you're reading in the correct clef, because if your clef is wrong, it's going to sound weird. If I play this whole thing in the bass clef, well, in the second measure you will see that, oh, B has a sharp, that's weird, it doesn't look right, B doesn't really have, oh, that's the wrong clef, right? And it's kind of too late to go back, so check your clefs before. There's another example with lots of verticality and horizontal movement as well. So I have a B minor, and I see already in my right hand I have two voices. Thumb is being held, and I'm gonna have to play the top voice with the remaining fingers in the right hand, while left hand switches the harmony. It's dominant tonic, then a little melodic fragment. Let's see, let me just think of the rhythm too. Because when you anticipate the melodic contour, you also anticipate the rhythmic contour too, right? Not just the notes. Here we go. Now I'm just walking you through basically. I would continue playing, but I want to point out that there's two things that changed. Now the clef has changed. I need to be alert that is now a treble clef, which is not a big deal because my left hand was already here, so I can go here. And the second thing is the left hand now has the kind of the right hand situation where what thumb is holding, and then my other fingers are playing the lower line, and the right hand has its own melody. Second half of this. Tip number 4, think and hear in a key, meaning that you know where your tonic is. That gives you an idea what your dominant is and the hierarchy of the steps on the scale and the function of the notes that you're playing, right? Recognize the initial key. Well, that will be given by the key signature. And when I sight read for the first time, unless it's an exam and you can't do that, I usually play the scale in that key that I'm gonna play in. And of course, you don't always stay in the same key. There could be key changes. So you have to be alert to those, right? So when you know what your key is and you play the scale, it helps you retain the correct sharps and flats that belong to the key. And that way you can focus only on accidentals that appear along the way. Especially watch out for raised leading tone in minor keys. That is a 7th step on the scale. And for a minor key, quick A minor, right? For natural minor, again, you can look it up what a leading tone is. It's the 7th step. In minor, it's usually a whole step away from the tonic, but to create a leading tone, we need to raise it by half step, and then it creates more tension to the tonic, so that's a leading tone. And it's always an accidental in the minor key to make a leading tone because naturally it is nothing. So when you raise it, you either will add a sharp or a natural if you originally had a flat on the 7th step. Here's an example where a tonicization occurs, or you're briefly emphasizing a different key that is not your original tonic. So you feel like you're suddenly, for a moment, in a different key, but it's a brief moment. It's called tonicization, not modulation. So original key here is B flat major, and then notice what happens. No extra accidental, so we're still in the key. Now notice there are some accidentals ahead. E natural, right? Now we're in F major, briefly in D minor, and then F major again. F sharp is slightly strange in F major. It's just an ornament. It could be spelled as G flat, but yeah. Now, moving forward, I already see ahead there was a B natural, canceling the B. And then I see B natural going to C, probably going to be in C minor. Right? And that way, I'm not going to play wrong notes here because I know why we have the change of accidentals. Back in B flat major. Tip number 5. It is closely related to the tip number 4 we just discussed. Skim through ahead of time. When I mean ahead of time, don't spend an hour doing that, but let's say you spend 10 seconds on that, right? Just quickly. Skim through and notice clef and or key signature changes. If your piece is in E major, let's say the 4 sharps got canceled and you have 4 naturals, where did you go? Well, most likely C major, could be A minor. And to not be shocked by it when it happens, you need to prepare. And how do you prepare? Well, I recommend thinking on a new scale. So instead of your fingers being here, your fingers suddenly shift here. And I don't just shift those 4 sharps that were there. I shift the whole thing. So I rethink on where my tonic is now, where my dominant is in a different place. So you have to shift your thinking immediately. And that is effective when you know your scales and you know your key signatures. When you don't, when you're not so familiar, this is maybe an area where you could improve by really knowing each scale in each key and which accidentals they have. So that will help you in these moments to be prepared. Preparing for modulations or tonicizations helps you quickly transition to a new set of keys, just like I said, and avoid carrying over the wrong accidentals and playing strange chords, especially at the most beautiful moments. Well, that's why do I mention beautiful moments? Because it often happens to me, where this is very emotional, very beautiful spot, and suddenly I play a horribly wrong note that totally doesn't go with the chord, and I'm super upset. Because it was one chance to do it. When you sight read, you can't replay, right? So it's gonna sound ugly. Of course, you can quickly correct yourself, but you have to keep going, and you're already upset. So to avoid that, you can prepare by anticipating those key changes. Here's an example. With a key signature change, I know it's an easy one, and you don't need me to show you, but I'm gonna show you a couple of things along with it. So Chopin Nocturne, number 13, Opus 48, number 1. Here we go. Notes. I only read the note that's changing because the rest I already know it stays the same. Right? I'm reading vertically and horizontally. Now, there are 5 chords coming up, but I already anticipate they all have to do with C major. So, well, I'm gonna only watch for the notes that are changing. Meaning the position, right? So here we had G. Now the G goes here to the left end, and then C goes up here. And now this. Now change the harmony to the minor. Now, of course, I'm going to look for notes that are held. G major. And then, again, I don't need to move my hands unless I'm given a specific fingering. But here I know that I need to go higher, and it's again, I'm keeping within the octave position because I can already anticipate that. So I will need to switch to shift slightly right here. Now this, and then here. And here, the most important thing here for me is to follow the top voice. Even here, I'm basically, if I'm playing in tempo, I'm gonna guess. And this is not the piece I would sight read. This part is not that hard. I'm guessing most of the time. I'm anticipating. This is a spot where I could look at my hands. Because when it's just the white keys, it's difficult. So then change. So a few strategies here too. That's it for this video. I hope you found at least some of these tips useful, and let me know if you have any other questions in the comments. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more videos. Bye.